Okay, so now I have my PDF and JPEG on my floor plan plotted from CAD and then my JPEG textures. So what I'm going to do now is open Photoshop, and then I always want to create a new file. So on the left hand side at the top we have a blue button that says new file. I always come to print, view all presets, and then choose A3, and then the orientation is landscape, and then I click create. Now, depending on your final purpose for this rendered floor plan, whether it's being printed or viewed digitally, you need to think about the scale that it's going to be viewed at. So is it going to be printed for a billboard? In which case your Photoshop canvas should be the size of that billboard. So that's always something to consider. So my Adobe Photoshop is here. I've got my background, and what I'm going to do on my computer is locate where my floor plan is and drag it onto my page. As soon as I let go, CAD will start to import it. Photoshop will start to import it. And at the top of my screen in the center, there's a tick. So I'm going to click the tick for yes. Now I want to use this version of the floor plan. I think it looks a bit nicer. So what I'm going to do, on my right-hand side of my Photoshop, I can see the original layer. I'm going to right click and I duplicate. Now I always like working on the copy and keeping a version of the original just in case something goes wrong. So I always toggle off the visibility of the original layer so that I've got this one to work with. Now what I need to do is make this editable. So I'm going to right click and say rasterize. And now I can edit this layer. So coming to the left hand side of my Photoshop where my tools are, I'm going to select the rectangular marquee tool and draw a rectangle over the floor plan that I want. And I want to delete everything else around it. So I'm going to come to the top of my screen in Photoshop and click select, and then inverse, and then on my keyboard press delete. And you can see that that takes away everything else. Now to deselect, it's Command D or Control D depending on your operating system. And what I'm going to do now is resize this. So Control or Command T takes you into transform. I'm going to bring it up to the very top corner and then drag it out to fill as much of the page as I can, and then bring it down a little bit so it's centered on the page, and then again I click the tick. So now I have my floor plan. What I need to do is select the areas where I want my different flooring to go. So I've got a timber flooring for my hallways and the most common areas. I've got a tile for my wet areas, and I've got carpet for my bedrooms. And I'll probably need to add in some concrete for the garage and some decking as well. So the first thing to do is select my magic wand, so the fourth button down on the left hand side, and I'm going to click or select the areas in my CAD file where I want this flooring to go. So remember, always select within our door swings as well. So this is my main hallway space. So now I have it selected, I'm going to come to the right hand side of my Photoshop screen and select the plus icon. So I'm going to add that here to create a new layer. Then I'm coming back over to my tools and I want to paint bucket a bright color into this flooring area, just so I can see exactly where everything's going. Now I can notice that there's a few door swings here, so if I need to zoom in, Command or Control plus on your keyboard and select those door swings, and I'm going to come back to layer 1 and paint bucket those. Now I rename my layers to represent the material that is going to go in them. So layer 1 on our right hand side here where our layers list is, going to double click, and this is going to become timber flooring. I'm going to repeat this process as many times as I need for all my different flooring types. So magic wand, select the tile, hold shift, select the tile in here, tile under my hot water tank, in my laundry, my door swings, and then in my bathroom here as well. Okay, don't forget to fill in that shower if you need to. Obviously, if you have furniture in here, this is going to have less selection. I've got this all selected. Right hand bottom corner of my Photoshop, add the new layer, choose a new color. I always just go bright random colors so I can clearly see the difference, and drop in that paint bucket. So that's looking good. Command D to deselect. So now I need to select my bedroom. So always coming back to my floor plan, magic wand, selecting the flooring in those bedrooms here, and all the door swings as well. Going to create a new layer and then fill in that with a different color. Let's go with blue. And again, we can just really clearly see where that different flooring is going to go. Command D for deselect, and I'm going to zoom out just to check my selection. Rename, so this is going to be my carpet. This is going to be my tiles. And then if I need to add, I'm coming back to the floor plan layer, and I can see this should be carpet as well. So I'm going to click on that, come to my carpet layer and paint bucket. Okay, Command D to deselect. Now I may also do the concrete at the same time. So I'm going to come to my floor plan layer again, magic wand, and select where that concrete's going to go. And out here too. New layer. And I'm going to just paint bucket that a color. Let's go yellow. The colors won't be seen in the end, so it really doesn't matter what color they are. So this is going to become my concrete. And then my final layer I'm going to use as decking. So remember, when you're rendering a floor plan, this is the only time your client will ever see the entire floor plan the entire floor finishes all at once together. So it's really important that we show that to our client. So if I had furniture in here, and as you can see I've done with the kitchen, I'm keeping all the rest of that white so as not to confuse it for my clients. So now I have got my floor plan layer, okay, and I can toggle that on and off just to check. I have also got my concrete, decking, carpet, tiles, and timber flooring layers. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, I want to start adding textures. So in my Finder or Windows Explorer, wherever your images are saved, the first thing I'm going to do is select the image I want, or the texture image, which in this case is a timber flooring. I'm going to right click and say open with Photoshop. And that's going to open this as its own Photoshop file. What I'm then going to do is I'm going to save this as a pattern. So in Photoshop, we have lots of additional tools, and patterns I find are really useful for rendering. So on the right hand side here, I've got what looks like a little hatch kind of woven icon. This is my patterns. Okay, so there's some already saved in here. I always like to create a new one for a project. So I'm going to click the plus icon, and this is my pattern name. I'm just going to use the same pattern name as the file and click OK. And that's now saved into my patterns. What I'm going to do is jump back to my floor plan. Okay, and you can see that that pattern is now on here. And what I'm going to do is click and drag it onto my timber flooring layer. And you can see it's placed in there straight away. Now, if I want to, I can edit this pattern fill. So by double clicking on the icon of that pattern, I can come in, I can change the angle if I want to. Okay, we can see that changing. I can change the scale as well. So you can type and also use the icons here. So I can make this a little bit smaller. We want it to be as realistic as possible. I can also snap it to an origin if I want. So at the moment I'm happy with this, and I'm going to click OK. So I keep repeating this process for all of my different textures. So I'm going to come in, right click on my terrazzo and say open with Photoshop, and then add this to my patterns. Okay. If you wanted to create more folders, you can do that as well. I'm coming back into here. If you wanted to do it another way, what I can do is select the tiles, come down to the very bottom where I have my shortcuts, FX, sorry, my bad, mask, and pattern. Woo! Okay, you can see it drags in a whole pattern everywhere where we didn't want it. So in this case, I'm going to cancel. What I'm going to do is toggle out my patterns here, and then drag it onto my tiles. And you can see it's popped in there, but that scale is way too big. So I'm going to double click on the pattern icon and I'm going to drag this right down. Okay, that is definitely looking a little bit better. Okay, so 20, I'm going to say okay. Now I want some carpet, so I'm going to come in here, right click on my carpet, open with Photoshop. And again, I'm going to add this as a pattern, come back to my floor plan and drag it onto my carpet layer. And you can see again, nice and big in scale. Let's bring this down all the way to say 10. And we'll click OK. So now what I need to add is some decking and some concrete. So I'm going to just jump back to my textures here. So concrete, polished concrete. Okay, just going with this polished concrete for now. I'm going to download that. And then I also need some decking. Okay, so decking can be a little bit more tricky. So I'm going to come to my Google Images search and have a look. Okay, so there's quite a lot here from SketchUp Texture Club that we can see. And if I want to, I can come to here and I can write decking, if I can spell correctly. So I got concrete. So while that SketchUp Texture Club is loading, I'm going to open my concrete in Photoshop and again add that as a pattern. Come back to my floor plan and pop that onto my concrete layer. And we can see that's filled up. And again, I just want to reduce that scale. And click OK. Jumping back to Google now. And just popping in the correct spelling. Those who know me know my spelling isn't great. So this floor plan's a little more complicated because there are so many different flooring textures, but you may only have one, in which case this would be a very fast process for you. Okay, that one's not working, so let's just have a look. We might do, say, an oak stretcher for our decking in this case, because that's just taking a little moment to load. The same thing, dragging it in, right click, open with Photoshop, add to your patterns, come back to your floor plan and drag that onto the layer that you want. Double click on the icon and then we can change the angle. So I'm going to change the angle of this floor plan to match the inside, sorry, the texture to match the inside, and then I'm going to bring that scale down as well. And click OK. So very quickly we are getting our rendered floor plan coming together. What I want to do now is I'm going to add an effects. So I'm going to add an inner shadow. So I'm coming back to my Photoshop floor plan layer, coming down to my options at the bottom of the layers, choosing FX, and I'm going to choose inner shadow. And what that will do is that gives me a layer style. And as I change things like the distance, we can see it affecting the image. Now, sorry about that. Let's come back to, say, my timber flooring. And let's add it to that layer, sorry. And we can see that it's added this shadow to the inside of that layer. So I can choose the opacity. So it's just starting to make it look a little bit more realistic, adding that shadow. I can also choose the color if I wanted to. I can increase the distance so you can see it coming all the way in. I can increase the size. Just going to turn that opacity up a little bit. Okay. And I'm going to click OK. So now you can see this layer has a pattern fill and an effects. So I'm going to do that same thing again, but for my tiles. So tiles, FX at the bottom, and choose inner shadow. And then I'm going to start to play with that. And you can see it affecting the drawing as well, just to give it a little bit more depth. So that's nice. So repeat this as many times as you feel necessary. You don't want to overdo it on your file. Okay. In the bedrooms. Sometimes if you need to play with the rotation a bit so you can actually see exactly how it's affecting the space. Okay, my concrete. Yeah, okay, so we can see that. I'm happy with that. And then my decking finally. Again, if you only have one flooring finish, you'll only need to do this once. I'm going to increase the distance a little on this one just because it is outside. And we can really quickly see that this rendered floor plan is coming together and would look really effective on a presentation board. So what I would do now is I would save my file. Always save the original on your computer in a Photoshop file. I always save it in the same place. Okay. Okay. Sorry, that's just taking a moment. And then we can export this as a JPEG ready to pop onto your presentation board. Now remember, while this is in proportion, we have taken it out of scale. So whatever you write the name, so floor plan, you always need to write NTS underneath for not to scale. Okay, sorry, not sure what's happening here for a moment. Again, if you're only using one floor finish throughout, this will be a much faster process. If you have any questions, please comment below or get in touch. Thanks, guys.